You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of The C-List. I'm Cindy Seidelman, and I'll be your guide to the wrestling shows that highlight those guys that get beat up for a living. This time around, we'll take a look at a pivotal point in the WWF, the creation of the $1 Million Corporation and the Undertaker versus Undertaker storyline. The Corporation was supposed to be this big heel stable, it was supposed to be the next big threat, but they turned out to be hollow since they never won on pay-per-view or won any titles. So we're heading to WWF Wrestling Challenge from July 24th, 1994, to see what happens when the Corporation and DiBiase's old bodyguard, Virgil, meet head-to-head. The show opens with a recap from last week's Wrestling Challenge where Virgil gets browbeaten by Ted DiBiase, saying that he was too good to him for allowing him to eat in the kitchens of restaurants and drive his limousines. We'll get to that in a bit, but we must dive into the show with the admittedly cool intro. I just absolutely love the intro. The music, the ring entrances, it was just fantastic. Our announcers for today are Sweet Stan Lane and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase himself. They start the show by talking about how the WWF has retained the services of Leslie Nielsen to get to the bottom of the disappearance of The Undertaker. Ted is skeptical because he has the services of his Undertaker, but is hopeful that Leslie Nielsen will reveal that Paul Bearer's find isn't the real Undertaker. We'll get to that later on the show. But let's head to the ring with match number 1, Razor Ramon versus Curtis Hairston. And that name has to be a rib because Curtis Hairston has no hair and looks like King Kong Bundy if he lost 250 pounds. During Razor's entrance, Stan Lane announces that at SummerSlam it will be Diesel defending his Intercontinental title against Razor Ramon. This match, though, is more like Razor beating up a kid's scooter. After a hair pull takedown by Hairston, Razor takes him to town with some really loud slaps, and Stan quips that he doesn't have to worry about anyone pulling his hair because he doesn't have any. Very astute, Stan. Razor proceeds to torture Hairston with a variant of the STF and an abdominal stretch bow and arrow type maneuver, which honestly looked really, really cool and should be a finisher. There's the usual song of belly to back superplex and Razor's Edge for the 3 at 3:30. Post-match, Ted says he's had all the machismo that he could stand and leaves the announce table to go prep Nikolai Volkov for his match against Virgil. We then go to a recap of the Heartbreak Hotel where Tatanka unleashes a big secret. He speaks of how he feels betrayed by Lex Luger because he sold out to Ted DiBiase. Sean says that him and Diesel have heard the rumors but want some hard proof. Tatanka does give him some hard proof in an interview that Jerry Lawler conducted with Ted DiBiase at King's Court. In the interview, Ted said that he is here to quash the rumor that he's trying to purchase Lex Luger. Because he has purchased Lex Luger. After hearing that news, Sean is jubilant about the news, saying that he's a really smart man for joining up with DiBiase and creating a stable of Nikolai, Bam Bam, Undertaker, and Lex. Match number 2, we have Nikolai Volkov against Virgil. Now, we have a lot of storylines going on here. Virgil was Ted's bodyguard before Virgil became a man thanks to Roddy Piper. Virgil eventually won the $1 Million title from DiBiase at SummerSlam 1991, but lost it back to him thanks to the Repo Man. When Ted came up with the Corporation, Volkov was the first one to join because he was broke and needed the money, so he's currently working for pennies on the dollar, even coming out with a cent sign on his shirt. Last week on Wrestling Challenge, Ted browbeat Virgil, and that set up this match. Volkov jumps Virgil, clubbing blows in the corner, and an Irish whip leads to Virgil trying to roll up Volkov for a 2. Sunset Flip leads to, credit OSW Review, Aloha Volkov, Aloha Volkov for a 2. And then a dropkick sends him to the outside. Virgil works on the arm in the match, but the tide turns after a big clothesline by Volkov. And after a really long bear hug spot, Stan says that Virgil doesn't need DiBiase's influence or money to make it in the WWF, which he's been doing since 1991 and carved up a kind of decent career for himself. He also says that Ted has helped feed Volkov's family and even given them second-hand shoes. Now I guess we know why Ted has his millions. He clothes his workers via the clothes from Goodwill. Cheers. Virgil does some juking and jiving to get Volkov down, and after some roll-ups, Virgil tries to lock on the $1 Million Dream, but Volkov backs him into a corner. Ted's had enough and tries to interfere in the match, but the first time didn't work as Virgil cut off Volkov's sneak attack. The second time had Ted throw $100 into the ring. Virgil picked it up and throws it back at Ted, but Volkov hits Virgil with a double axe handle and a pile driver for the 3 at 5:13. It was a quick match, and it was a very exciting match, and I just thought it flowed well. I kind of wish this was the main event, because you could have built this up well. Post-match, Stan hypes up the Nikolai Volkov Tatanka $10,000 challenge on Raw. Ted hands Volkov the $100 to stuff in Virgil's mouth. He does, but Ted immediately grabs it back. This will also be Virgil's last TV match for the WWF until his return in 2010 when he became Ted Jr.'s bodyguard. He'd still wrestle on house shows, but work independence until 1996, where he'd show up in WCW as Vincent, Ted DiBiase's bodyguard for the NWO. We'll be seeing Vincent again in future episodes where we cover WCW Worldwide and Pro. Match number 3 features Doink the Clown with Dink versus JC Storm. Doink grabs Storm in a headlock and Dink proceeds to spank Storm in a form of humiliation. JC is completely distracted by Dink, and Doink just takes complete advantage until a well-placed boot in the corner turns the tide for 5 seconds and bloodies Doink's lip, but Doink gets the advantage quickly back. The commentators don't even mention the match, since most of the time they talk about Lex Luger selling out to Ted DiBiase, furthering that storyline. Doink continues to work on Storm's arm until hitting a running power slam and then his whoopee cushion for the 3 and 303. Ted says that he'd like to see Yokozuna climb up there and do that to Doink. To be honest, I would like to see that too. Then we get to a promo for SummerSlam where Undertaker will make his return against Ted's Undertaker and said that he will not rest in peace. As a kid, I loved this feud. I ate it up. As an adult, though, it's still engaging even if Ted's Undertaker is nowhere near the real deal. Now we get to the WWF SummerSlam report by Todd Pettengill. He hypes up the tickets to get them quick because they are flying faster than free OJ shirts in California. They still would fly really quick if he said that last week, but that's neither here nor there. He hypes up The Undertaker versus The Undertaker match and Leslie Nielsen's involvement, which should be loads of fun. Then we get to the second main event in Brett versus Owen in a steel cage, which should be a true happening. Brett cuts a promo on Owen saying that he did beat him at WrestleMania. He then brought up the story about how Owen kicked Stu and Helen off of Owen's property when they tried to reason with him. That set off Brett, and now we have the steel cage match to decide it. He says that it will be his victory and he will win the steel cage match. Todd also hypes up Razor versus Diesel for the IC title. Diesel cuts a promo calling Razor a glutton for punishment, and Sean says that he'll be getting another loving spoonful of Diesel and will once again go down at the hands of Diesel. Todd says that the card is shaping up to be one of the best SummerSlams of all time. To be honest, I'd have to rewatch it, but seeing the card, it looks like a pretty darn good pay-per-view. We get a repeat of the previous promo, but instead, it's Leslie Nielsen! Yes! Finally! Frank Drebin on my TV! He says that he is a man of no fear, but when he says that he's seen the light, they go dark, and he proceeds to be scared. I love this bit. It was fantastic. Match number 4, we have Owen Hart with Jim Neidhart versus Matt Hardy. Delightful! No, you didn't hear me wrong. It clearly is Mr. Broken Brilliance himself, Matt Hardy. By the way, check out my latest editorial at Angry Marks about the latest going-ons about that, entitled Ed Nordholm Needs to Wave the Flag on the Broken Brilliance Fight. It's kind of interesting to see Matt before we saw him in the Attitude Era wearing plaid pants and later becoming part of the New Brood. This time around, he's not wearing plaid pants. He's wearing a weird white and green attire with an H on his pants, kind of like a hurricane-esque outfit going on. The match starts with Matt wrestling him until Hardy gets to the ropes. They exchange hammerlocks till Owen elbows him and hits him with a neckbreaker when Matt telegraphed a back body drop 10 seconds before Owen got to him. After a camel clutch move, Matt gets some offense in with a headlock, but Owen shoves him off and gets the better of him with a hip toss. We want Brett chants permeate through the match as Owen goes to town with Matt with knee drops, body slams, and a leg choke spot. Matt gets Irish whipped to the ropes, ducks a clothesline, and attempts a moonsault off the top rope. It looked fantastic. However, that proved to be his undoing as Owen ducked it and then hits an enziguri for the 3 and 348. Post-match, Owen puts Matt in a sharpshooter until the count of 4 and shoves a pair of Bret Hart's sunglasses in Matt's mouth, a la Ted's money spot at the end of his matches. Ted is completely warmed up to Owen because of it, and is putting him over big as the next huge heel, and possibly the next world champion. Then we get a promo by Paul Bearer on how Ted's Undertaker can wrestle and is evil, but his Undertaker is better, and the ref will count him out 1, 2, 3. I have to say, this rivalry's been built up well. And now we get a hype package for Yokozuna and Crush versus Typhoon and Mabel on Wrestling Challenge next week. you know you're going to be in trouble when the best worker in the ring is the ref. Our main event is Yokozuna versus Steve Smith, and let's be honest, this isn't much of a main event. Pre-match, Ted rants on Paul's promo and says that he has the only real Undertaker because he brought him into the WWF in 1990. Both Ted and Stan are quite curious about why Yokozuna isn't involved in the SummerSlam matches because of the Undertaker. It was basically Yoko and the entire heel roster that put Undertaker out for months. The match, though, is just Yoko squashing Steve Smith with a headbutt, a choke spot on the ropes, and a belly-to-belly suplex for the three in less than a minute. Post-match, Yoko decides to attack the guy again with some leg drops until Mabel and Typhoon make the save. Yoko gets out of the ring and just waits until next week for the big tag team match to happen between him and Crush versus Typhoon and Mabel. Gorilla then gets to them at the end of the show, telling Ted DiBiase to get down, and then talks to Mabel and Typhoon about next week's match. They say they're the biggest tag team in the WWF, and it's payback time before we fade to black. This show furthered the Undertaker storyline in lots of ways. First, it debuted Leslie Nielsen to add some levity to the proceedings, and his bits were really well done. Secondly, Ted was riding high on his Taker being the real McCoy, at least in his mind. And thirdly, we have Yoko being a bit scared about the return of the Undertaker. So we have a good edition of Wrestling Challenge, especially with all the storylines we're getting, and especially the Nikolai Volkov-Virgil match being quite good. That's going to do it for this installment of the C-List. I'm Cindy Seidelman, and until next time, bye-bye!
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.